Someone asks you for a favor you don't have time for. You already know you should say no. You open your mouth to say it, and what comes out instead is, yeah, sure, no problem. You didn't decide that. Some part of you decided it for you, faster than the part that was trying to say no could even finish forming the word. If that's ever happened to you, you're not bad at boundaries. You're not just too nice. Something much older than your personality is running the show. And today, we're going to find out what it actually is, where it came from, and why it's so much harder to override than people think. Quick thing before we go further. If you've ever said yes to something and felt resentment creeping in 5 minutes later, you already know exactly what this video is about. And if you want more of this kind of digging into the weird machinery running under your everyday behavior, subscribing helps more than you'd think. All right, let's go back, not to yesterday, to about 50,000 years ago. Picture a small group of early humans living together, the same 30 or so faces every single day. There's no walking away from this group, no new city to move to, no anonymous crowd to disappear into. If this group decides you're a problem, that's not an awkward week. That can be the end of you. In a world like that, conflict with someone more powerful in the group wasn't just uncomfortable, it was genuinely dangerous. And here's the thing about danger your ancestors couldn't fight and couldn't run from, which was most of it, honestly, since you can't outrun your own tribe. The body still needed a third option. You've probably heard of fight or flight. What most people haven't heard is that trauma researchers eventually added a third and a fourth response to that list. Freeze, when neither fighting nor running is possible, and fawn, which is the one we're actually talking about today. Fawning means appeasing, agreeing, making yourself useful and pleasant enough that the threat decides you're not worth turning on. And it's not just a human thing either. Watch primates for long enough and you'll see the same strategy everywhere. A lower-ranking chimpanzee doesn't challenge a more dominant one. It grooms them, it defers, it makes itself small and helpful. That's not weakness, that's a functioning survival strategy in a social hierarchy where losing a conflict could mean losing your place in the group entirely. So somewhere back there, a nervous system that could smoothly slide into appeasement mode when it sensed a threat had a real advantage. It kept people safe inside the group instead of getting pushed out of it. And that circuitry didn't get deleted just because most of us don't live in tribes of 30 anymore. The person who coined the actual term for this is a therapist named Pete Walker, who spent decades working with survivors of complex trauma. He noticed something that didn't fit neatly into the fight, flight, or freeze categories everyone already knew. Some of his clients, when they sensed danger, didn't tense up or bolt or shut down. They got warmer, more agreeable, more helpful, almost instantly. Walker started calling this the fawn response, and he traced it specifically to childhoods where showing anger or even just having a need got met with punishment, withdrawal, or things escalating fast. A kid figures out quick that being difficult is not safe. Being useful is. Being pleasant is. So a version of you gets built early, one whose entire job is to read a room for tension and dissolve it before it becomes a problem, usually by absorbing whatever cost that takes. Here's the part that actually explains the party scenario, or the coworker who keeps asking for favors, or the friend who somehow always gets what they want from you. If fawning got wired in during childhood as the safest available strategy, your body doesn't file that away once you turn 18 and move out. It just keeps running the program on anyone who even slightly resembles a threat, which by adulthood can be almost anyone. A raised eyebrow, a slightly flat tone of voice, someone just seeming a little disappointed. There's actual neuroscience behind why this feels so involuntary. Researchers working with polyvagal theory point to a part of the nervous system called the ventral vagal complex, which handles social engagement, essentially your body's system for reading and responding to other people in real time. In someone with a strong fawn pattern, that system doesn't wait for a conscious decision. It fires the appeasement response the instant it senses possible disapproval, well before the thinking part of your brain even gets a vote. Which is why saying no in that moment doesn't feel like choosing between two options. It feels like trying to hold back a reflex. There's a related idea worth mentioning here too. Psychologist Shelley Taylor studied how humans respond to stress beyond just fighting or fleeing, and found a pattern she called tend-and-befriend, where under threat, people, especially in tightly bonded social groups, often move toward connection and caretaking rather than away from it. Making peace, tending to the group, keeping the bond intact, all of that can function as its own kind of safety strategy. Fawning fits neatly inside that bigger picture, befriending the threat in a sense so it stops being a threat at all. Quick question for the comments while we're here. When someone asks you for something you don't want to do, does your body actually feel it? A tightness, a jump in your chest before your mouth even answers? Or does the yes just slide out smooth and easy, no warning at all? I'm curious which one's more common. Now here's where it gets useful, because there's a real test for telling the difference between actual kindness and fawning. And it's not about what you do, it's about what happens in your body right before you do it. Genuine kindness tends to feel, if not exactly effortless, at least neutral. You help because you want to, and afterward you generally feel fine, sometimes even good. Fawning feels different from the inside. Right before the yes comes out, there's often a small flicker of dread or a disproportionate spike of anxiety about what might happen if you said no. And afterward, instead of feeling good, a lot of people report a kind of quiet resentment they can't quite explain, because some part of them knows the yes wasn't fully a choice. That gap between what you agreed to and what you actually wanted is exactly why fawning is so exhausting long term. It's not that helping people is inherently draining, it's that every yes driven by fear costs you something you don't get to consciously track, a small piece of a boundary you didn't get to keep. And this is the part that tends to surprise people the most. Fawning isn't really a personality trait, even though it gets mistaken for one all the time. People call it being a pushover, or too nice, or a doormat, all words that make it sound like a character flaw you should just try harder to fix. But if it's actually a trained nervous system response, then it's not a personality issue any more than a flinch at a loud noise is a personality issue. It's a reflex that was built for a specific kind of danger, and it's still firing long after that particular danger stopped being relevant. Here's another honest one for the comments. Think about the last time you said yes to something you didn't want to do. Was it with someone who actually has real power over you right now, like a boss, or was it with someone who really couldn't do much to you at all, like a coworker you barely know or an acquaintance from years ago? I want to see how often the fawn response fires at people who genuinely can't hurt us anymore.